Could the Jacksonville Jaguars lose both their coordinators this offseason? We're going to talk about it, plus discuss some latest AFC South news concerning Liam Coen. We'll get into it later on today's show. But before we get into it, guys, we've been challenged to a little Florida sub battle. My guy, Reed Barkis, who ironically is producing this video right now, he's doing a great job crushing it at Bucks Breakdown. But we were giving this onus at Chat Sports to basically race to 1K, and the winner receives more videos that they can put out on the channel. We're roughly, me and Reed right now, putting about 3 videos a week here on Bucks and Jags respectively. Help us show that we're the best fan base in the state of Florida by subbing to Jags now. And without any further ado, let's get into today's video. You're watching Jags Now by Chat Sports. I am your host, Cullen Brown, and as we mentioned off the top, we're going to be discussing the latest Jags news and rumors surrounding both their coordinators heading into this offseason. Let's get straight into it with Grant Udinski, who's getting a lot of buzz and a lot of traction for the Cleveland Browns head coach opening. Adam Schefter had this note on Sunday, said the Browns have now requested a second head coach interview with Jaguars offensive coordinator Grant Udinski, this time in person. Udinsky would become the youngest NFL head coach ever if he lands a job at 30 years old. He recently turned 30 this month. Would even be younger than Sean McVay if he were to be hired, which is crazy to say. And listen, Cleveland's a real threat to land Udinsky. I think that during the virtual interview that they had for the Verse interview, based on all the reports that are out there, it seemed like it went really well. And Cleveland's, I think, based on their kind of track record with the interviews that they've done so far and now some of the second interviews that they've gotten here started, I think they're willing to kind of take risks. And Udinsky, we've talked about it before, he's well-respected, well-liked amongst NFL circles, and clearly the Browns liked him enough to give him a second interview, along with these 5 names that you're seeing on screen right here. And I think that Udinsky's well is in the mix for to be the next Cleveland Browns head coach, along with guys like Todd Monken, Jim Schwartz, Mike McDaniel, Jesse Minter, and Nate Scheelhaase out of Los Angeles. And look, Udinsky has the kind of unique scenario of not only also, never calling plays as the offensive coordinator in his one season for Jacksonville, but also just never being a head coach, obviously, as well. You would feel better if you were to hire Udinsky, if you were to have somebody that's been a head coach before, somebody with just that amount of experience that Udinsky could lean on in this process. Well, the Browns technically have that. While they are interviewing Jim Schwartz, to also be, to potentially become their head coach position. What if Schwartz were to pair up with Udinsky to form a dynamic duo in Cleveland? Obviously, that would be devastating for Jaguars fans, as I think Udinsky had his hand really into the Jaguars' success on offense this season. Trevor Lawrence has spoken about it. Liam Coen raves about him. And I think that Cleveland is starting to see that value in Jacksonville, and that's part of the downside of having a great season, is that your coordinators are, primed to be poached, for lack of a better term. So I think if Udinsky does get hired by Cleveland, they will bring in a secondary name that's been an offensive mind, been a head coach before, that can kind of help with, bringing Udinsky under the wings. And if you're the Jaguars fans, while it may suck, it is kind of Udinsky's, best service to himself in order to explore this opportunity. So I do think that Cleveland is a real possibility, and that would leave the Jaguars with an opening at their offensive coordinator position. And I kind of went back and, last night when I was scripting this, I was thinking, all right, who could be some possible replacements for Grant Udinski? And these are the names that I came up with. Nate Scheelhaase, who was previously mentioned, ironically, also in the Cleveland Browns head coaching search. If you remember, he was actually the betting favorite to become the Jaguars offensive coordinator last year before Udinski, before Scheelhaase actually pulled his own name out. He's the current pass game coordinator, obviously, with the Los Angeles Rams. And I think that the next logical step for Scheelhaase, if he doesn't get a head coaching opportunity, which that's still obviously on the table for him, is to become an offensive coordinator, preferably one that's obviously play calling, but maybe he just takes the upgrade in Jacksonville. Josh Grizzard, who was the pass game coordinator under Liam Coen in Tampa Bay, and obviously was the former Bucs OC. Obviously has that history with Liam Coen. Does Coen just simply bring Grizzard in, knows that he can, run the jobs of being an offensive coordinator, a mind that Liam Coen trusts? And then 2 guys in-house. Spencer Whipple, who's the Jaguars quarterback coach, obviously had a lot of success with Trevor Lawrence this year, could be a potential option. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Shane Waldron, who had some, let's just call it, lack of success at his previous 2 stops as offensive coordinator, both with the Seattle Seahawks and the Chicago Bears, rather, pardon me. I don't think this would be my favorite of the 4 options, but because he is the current pass game coordinator, there have been some buzz around Shane Waldron potentially becoming the offensive coordinator if Grant Udinski were to leave. So just some names to keep in mind here for Jaguars fans. We'll see and keep you updated on the latest when it comes to Grant Udinski, but Cleveland certainly has their eye on the whiz kid from Jacksonville, and there is a real chance that Udinski could be heading to Cleveland this offseason. Moving to the other coordinator now, Anthony Campanile, who yesterday Adam Schefter broke the news that he is interviewing for the Baltimore Ravens head coaching position. And it's pretty remarkable, right, that Campanile and, the Jaguars could lose both their coordinators, but Campanile himself, he's done a really good job working his way through the NFL ranks. He originally started his NFL career back in 2020 as the Dolphins linebacker coach. He was there for 4 seasons. He then became the Packers linebacker coach and run game coordinator back in 2024. Obviously had that connection to also Jeff Hafley and John Eric Sullivan, which could he potentially become the defensive coordinator in Miami? I mean, that's another possibility. He did spend this past season as the Jaguars defensive coordinator, during 2025. And I think for Campanile, who becomes the 16th person to interview for the Baltimore Ravens head coaching position, this is one of the more unlikely, out of the 2 coordinators to leave, in my opinion. I think Campanile, did a really good job for the Jaguars defense last year. We've talked about having the number 1 rush defense in the entire NFL, number 2 in takeaways, and this is really with a lot of not, his guys, quote unquote. I mean, taking over fresh for a new system, and the way he was able to solidify himself as one of the brighter defensive minds in all of the National Football League. I think Campanile naturally is going to draw some interest. Now, with, Robert Saleh getting hired as the Tennessee Titans head coach, there's now 6 updated head coaching openings around the NFL league. We've got the Arizona Cardinals, Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns, Las Vegas Raiders, and the Pittsburgh Steelers all vying for head coaches. And just kind of running through these quickly here. The Cardinals, they are interested in Vance Joseph. Could they potentially look at a Campanile after already having Jonathan Gannon as their previous head coach? Maybe do they want to go an offensive mind? We'll see. Buffalo, they just fired Sean McDermott. You would think they'd like to pair an offensive mind around Josh Allen, really get the most out of their quarterback there in Buffalo. Same with Baltimore and Lamar Jackson, although they have been also rumored in Brian Flores. They obviously interviewed Campanile as well, as we've obviously already previously mentioned. Cleveland's on their second round of candidates there with Grant Udinski, among others. The Raiders seem to be very interested in Chargers defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, so that could be a potential opening that gets closed here very quickly as we sit here at 12:13 Central Time on January 20th. And the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's going to be a true wild card. Mike McCarthy has emerged as a potential candidate for the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have only had a handful of coaches since 1969. It's pretty freaking crazy. So, look, if you're asking me plain and simply out of these 2 coordinators, who I think is most likely to say, I do think it's Anthony Campanile. And not to say that he isn't deserving of a potential head coach job here in the NFL, but it just seems like the way of the landscape and the way that things are falling, it probably is going to take another year of being a defensive coordinator, whether it is here in Jacksonville, which that is the ideal hope. Because the only other option I could see him being a defensive coordinator, like I said, is if Jeff Hafley wants to bring him in Miami. Would he take a lateral move? I'm not sure. I really don't think so, but I highly doubt Anthony Campanile is going to be a head coach this coaching cycle. Could be proven wrong, but it seems like he is here to stay in Duval County. But I'll ask you guys, though, more likely to get hired out of these 2 coordinators, Grant Udinski, I want you to type GU if you think he is on his way out. Type AC if you think it's Anthony Campanile, or if you think it's neither, type in down below in the comments section. Let me know. Get your thoughts down below. Speaking of the Titans and hiring Robert Saleh, Ian Rappaport had the note late last night that the Titans are set to hire former 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh as their next head coach. Saleh impressed during the interview process and led them to hire him, the former Jets head coach and 49ers obviously defensive coordinator. And look, I think Saleh is going to be a mind that's well respected. He obviously didn't have the most successful tenure with the Jets, but let's face it, who has had a successful tenure with the New York Jets as of late? So he now joins, a division featuring, Shane Steichen in Indianapolis. You obviously have Saleh now in Tennessee. You have Houston with DeMeco Ryans. And obviously, for your Jacksonville Jaguars, Liam Coen. And now that they're set to face off 2 times a year, this is actually kind of a, mini rivalry renewed a little bit here if you're Jacksonville. And if you're unfamiliar, if you're, not sure of what happened earlier this year between these two teams, the San Francisco 49ers and Jacksonville Jaguars actually faced off back in week 4. The Jaguars obviously coming up on top, 26-21 in that matchup. And listen, there were some words exchanged between Saleh and Liam Coen. Going into that game, Saleh was asked at some point during the week by San Francisco media just thoughts on Liam Coen, and he kind of brushed back that, obviously Coen coming from the Sean McVay tree, that those guys have a legal way of stealing signs, and the way he kind of phrased it was very weird, and Coen obviously took exception to it after the game, saying, quote, "keep my name out of your mouth." After they won on the field, there was a mic'd up moment that went viral on Twitter, and Saleh later afterwards clarified his comments, saying he was actually trying to pay Coen a compliment. Not really sure calling a legal signing just as a way of giving a compliment, but I digress. Now these two are in the same division, and I think there's going to be no love lost whenever the Titans and the Jaguars face off here in the coming seasons here, 2026 and beyond. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a great matchup between an really well-respected offensive mind in Liam Coen and a really well-respected defensive mind in Robert Saleh. But yeah, that's the law of the land here. We'll see the more updates that come in on both Anthony Campanile and Grant Udinski here in the coming days. So make sure you guys hit that subscribe button to keep you guys updated with the latest surrounding the Jacksonville Jaguars. And as always, Duval! We'll see.